Hi, hello. Hi.
Satyajit Ray, one of the greatest filmmakers of the 20th century, was a Renaissance man who displayed a prodigious talent in almost every sphere of the arts that culminated in a mastery over the film language. But Ray was so much more than a filmmaker.
Sketching, painting, drawing, I had it in the back of my mind while I was in college.
He was a pioneer in the field of graphic design and calligraphy, becoming a leading typographer and book jacket designer in the early days of his career. He revived the popular children's monthly magazine, Sandesh, in 1961, which he illustrated, edited, and contributed stories. But a childhood fascination with films drew him into the world of celluloid. His debut film, Pathar Panchali, rewrote the history of Indian cinema.
Making a film of Pathar Panchali first came to me when I was doing illustration.
The film has been hailed as a masterpiece of modern cinema and was awarded the Best Human Document Award at the 1956 Cannes Film Festival. It marked the birth of a legend who made extraordinary films about ordinary people.
The guiding principle was faithfulness to the spirit of the original book.
A master of his universe, Ray demanded creative control on every aspect of his films, including screenwriting, art direction, cinematography, music composition, and even publicity design, leaving an unmistakable stamp of an auteur on his work and creating some of the most unforgettable moments of world cinema. Over a career spanning 4 decades, Ray directed 28 feature films, several documentaries, a short film, and a telefilm, many of which have left an indelible mark on the history of Indian cinema. Ray became a cultural icon on both national and world stage. Ray won 36 national film awards and was a darling of the International Film Festival circuit, most notably winning the Golden Bear and 2 Silver Bears at the Berlin Film Festival and the Golden Lion and several critics awards at the Venice Film Festival. In 1992, he was conferred an honorary Oscar by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.
It's an extraordinary experience for me, certainly the best achievement of my movie-making career.
In recognition of his matchless contribution to the cultural and filmic landscape of the country, India honored Ray with the Dada Saheb Phalke Award and the Bharat Ratna. May 2nd, 2021 marks the birth centenary of Satyajit Ray. Today, on his 100th birthday, we remember the genius and master of cinema, Satyajit Ray.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to everyone who has joined this session. I can see 200 people right now, which is a phenomenal number, and a great tribute to the great master himself. हमारे देश में परंपरा है सेंटिनरीज मनाने को, लेकिन हम लोग सेंटिनरीज मनाते हैं बड़े कोई हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट्स हों, वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस, या कोई बहुत बड़े रिलीजियस लीडर्स हों या बड़े पॉलिटिकल लीडर्स हों. आर्टिस्ट्स की सेंटिनरी मनाने की प्रथा हमारे देश में इतनी ज़्यादा है नहीं. और अगर आज हम सत्यजीत रे की सेंटिनरी मना रहे हैं तो ये बहुत अच्छी बात है. इट इज़ अ मैटर ऑफ ग्रेट प्राइड बिकॉज वी आर सेलिब्रेटिंग अ colossus in filmmaking who made films that were rooted in his soil and which earned not only global audience but global respect for Indian cinema. And the best way to celebrate a life such as Ray's is to try and understand his work. So this program is in the nature of a seminar, which means the conversation would be somewhat deep, uh, and we will try and delve into the width and depth of Ray's work. We will be seeing a few clips, and those clips are somewhat longish because it is very difficult to actually clip out of Ray's films. It's a very scary feeling to try and get clips out of Ray's films. But if we have to understand Ray in a seminar situation, then we have to do that. So some patience is requested while we run the clips because we can't chop Ray arbitrarily. We will have to have a complete scene being shown. And when this is happening, one thing, I think a lot of people already know this, but one thing to do is to pin the clip. So if you take your cursor to the clip and see a drawing board pin icon there, if you pin it, then it becomes a full screen. And it's a very good idea to see Ray's work full screen. Secondly, if there is a possibility of having a headphone, then it's also a very good idea to have a headphone, because Ray works on a soundtrack in a range of audio levels, you would say, and it is not a good idea to miss any of those levels. So of course, he's made his films to be shown in a dark auditorium, a huge room, big hall, silence, etc. And again, we are trying to do this over a computer. So therefore, it's a good idea to be using a headphone, and then in fact increase the level if you're not hearing. Because Ray's films I have seen have very, very soft sounds, and you can completely miss them. And if you miss them, then you miss Ray's storytelling. So those are, and also those who are not speaking, it's a very good idea to keep their mics on mute because the audio otherwise carries through. So to get started, I would like to introduce our panelists of this seminar to you. And those are very, very important people. And all of them are great creative artists in their own right. They are men and women of great eminence, and I really cannot order their introduction. So I said, let's just do this alphabetically. I really have no way of comparing anybody with anybody, and I think it should always be done alphabetically. So this is what I will do. The first person is my senior at FTII and my great friend Amit Tyagi. So let me introduce Amit Tyagi to you. Amit Tyagi is one of the few FTII alumni who have earned 2 diplomas at FTII in film editing and a post-diploma in film direction. Amit has worked in every field of the audiovisual spectrum, from documentaries to television series to fiction films, both in India and internationally. He returned to FTI as Dean Films from 2016 to 2018 and is currently the Associate Director of MIT School of Film and Television. Our second panelist is Ms. Arunaraje Patil. Arunaraje is a critically acclaimed writer, editor, director, and producer. Graduating from FTII with a gold medal, she was one of the earliest women techno artists in the Indian film industry. A winner of 5 national awards, she has been teaching filmmaking for long and has founded Shift Focus, a school for cinema and life. She has been a life coach and a strong voice for gender equality, empowering women and men to find a new equation to live in peace and harmony. Her autobiography, Freedom, My Story, is an inspiring account of her life and films. In webinars, we do not have a possibility of cutting to the panelists, which is what we should ideally do. But you are welcome to pin the panelist, and then you will see the panelist full screen. Our third panelist is Ashok Viswanathan, an FTII direction alumnus, is a multiple national and international award-winning filmmaker with 11 feature films to his credit. He is also a prolific short and documentary filmmaker with more than 100 projects completed in the last 30 years. He's a screenwriter and author with several writings on cinema and theater. Currently Dean of SRFTI Kolkata, he was a Charles Wallace Scholar at Downing College, Cambridge in 1997. Fourth panelist is Dr. Jabbar Patel, who's an eminent playmaker. And it's not written here, but I have to say that Dr. Jabbar Patel is by qualification a doctor, medical doctor. He's a doctor you go to when you're not well. And he had a very iconic nursing home, which told us when we traveled from Delhi that we are nearing Pune. So he's a very, very eminent and a very, very competent doctor. And besides that, and despite being a busy doctor, he's also done a lot of plays with Jabbar. I mean, I feel like stopping to read this formal thing because when I was a student here, fortunately, Jabbar's best plays were being produced and screened in Pune, and I happened to see almost all of them. But going back to the formal introduction, his production of Vijay Tendulkar's Gashiram Kotwal is considered a classic in modern theatre. According to me, Three Penny Opera and Padgam are also classics of Indian theatre. He has also made such renowned classics of Marathi cinema such as Samna, Jait Re Jait, Umbertha, Simhasan, and Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. He was conferred the Nargis Dutt Award for Best Feature Film on National Integration for his Marathi film Mukta in 1995. He is currently the guiding light for both the Pune International Film Festival and MIT Film School. Panelist number 5 is Kedar Avti. Kedar Avti is a doctor from State University, New York, USA in music composition. He worked as professor of music at FTII from March 1992 to his retirement in January 2017, composed music for a good many diploma films, served as Dean Faculty of Film, FTII, between June 2008 and January 2011. Next, we have Madhu Apsara. Madhu Apsara is an alumnus of FTII of the 1988 batch, that is his joining year, with sound as specialization. He passed out of FTII in 1991 and has been recording and designing sound for feature films and documentaries like Andhadhun, Badlapur, Agent Vinod, Johnny Gaddar, Ek Hasina Thi, Dharavi, Hazaron Khwahishein Aisi, Gattu, and Stanley Ka Dabba, among others. He was closely associated with Manikal ever since he passed out of FTII. He joined the sound department of FTII Film Wing in the year 2017 as an associate professor. And finally, Santosh Sivan, very eminent cinematographer, also my classmate, I can happily say. Santosh Sivan is a cinematographer, film director, producer, and actor known for his works in Malayalam cinema, Tamil cinema, Hindi cinema, and international cinema. Santosh graduated from the Film and Television Institute of India. He is a founding member of the Indian Society of Cinematographers and is the most awarded director of photography in India. As a cinematographer, he has won several national awards, including 4 for Best Feature Film Cinematography. He was awarded the Padma Shri for his contribution to Indian cinema in 2014. So, such a massive panel, I have to drink a little bit of water now. As we get started, by way of introduction, we are on a centenary year of Satyajit Ray, so he was born 100 years ago. And his last film was made roughly 30 years back. That's 3 decades, 1 generation ago. So that was a long time back. My first question to the members of our esteemed panel is, what would they think is his relevance for the filmmaker today, or the film student today? How does Ray continue to be relevant? And we can start with Amit Tyagi in the same alphabetical order.
क्यों मेरे अलावा कोई और नहीं मिला था?
आपका नाम alphabetical order में सबसे ऊपर आता है.
Anyway, look, there are 2-3 things you need to know when you talk of Ray. One, that Ray was extremely classically oriented filmmaker. When we say classical, we mean that he followed the rules of cinema as were laid down through the 40s and 50s. Now, why were these rules of cinema laid down? There is a very simple logic to it. Cinema is a set of still photographs which have been joined together to create an illusion of reality in the audience's mind. To retain this illusion of reality, over the years, filmmakers discovered, most importantly in Hollywood, because they made most of the films in those days, they discovered a set of rules which helped in laying down the illusion of reality for an audience. Ray in India was the filmmaker who followed these rules. From where he learned them, don't ask me. It honestly beats me. I wouldn't know where the hell he learned them, but he did know them extremely well. That is why today you call him as a classical filmmaker, which is also why when you talk of, for example, the French, who specialized in every goddamn thing experimental, and when you talk of Godard or Rene, Rai can't be compared to that kind of filmmaking generations because his work is entirely different. It's very classically oriented. The nearest you come to comparing Rai for the sheer clarity of his narrative is probably to the craft clarity which I see in Steven Spielberg's work. Spielberg has a similar range of work spanning over many years, which is marked by the clarity of thought and craftsmanship which you see in his filmmaking. That is something which anybody, even today, can learn from Rai. I'm not talking of the subject. Jabbar sir knows more about all that than I do, so he'll mention that to you. I'm just bringing up the craft questions, that purely from a craft point of view, you can watch each one of Rai's films and see the almost perfect craftsmanship in the film, which is something you can learn even today. I think that should be enough, Pankaj.
Yeah, Amit, it is very nice and it's very succinct and very clear. Aruna ji, what are your views on Ray's legacy and relevance?
I think the relevance today is bigger than ever, I would say. Somehow, he was a master storyteller, master craftsman, and, people may have a lot of talent and all, that's fine. For one, he was self-taught. He really put in a lot of effort to understand the language of cinema. To understand, you see, it's not enough, the language of cinema. You have to look at the world around. After all, films are about human beings and life. And he was a great observer, great person to understand how people behave, human behavior, and how people function in life. How do they deal with life? And inside of all that, one of the big things I'll say, he was a very dedicated. If you want mastery in anything, it may be music or anything else, the kind of hours you put in, the riyaz you do before you can be called a master. And I think he was so meticulous, so hardworking, so dedicated, so demanding. I mean, he would want nothing less than perfection. If you see the kind of work, the way he's put together and to get the best out of people, I think that's what in today's generation, if I have to say one thing to people, yes, you may have some talent, you may have learned a lot of things, but if you don't have dedication, if you don't have that commitment, if you don't have that passion, you're never going to be a master. It's like really going out there. Everything he did, I mean, look at his characterization. Look at every frame that he created with his amazing cameraman and the sound, the mise en scène, how he blocked the scenes. I mean, every bit of it speaks so loud and so clear. Okay, who's making the film? A person with immense amount of passion, immense amount of dedication, no shortcuts, and he would do it till he achieved perfection in his own mind, till he could actually communicate. And today, I saw Pather Panchali first, that's my first introduction to Rai, 67, 68. That was as far back as that. And even now when I see it, I see something new, something different. So I think that's what's amazing. And that's how classics also get made. They remain forever, for a long time. And there's every time there's something different. And I think that's what I would see is a big legacy and for us to follow.
That's true, Aruna ji. Ray was once asked where did he learn his filmmaking, and he was, of course, a very talented artist before he went into films, and he knew cartooning and drawing and book cover making and all of those things. So he said he learned his filmmaking from American filmmakers, and of the American filmmakers, he talks of George Cukor, John Ford, Frank Capra. Filmmakers of that age and that era. And then he says something very interesting. He figured at some point of time that many of these American filmmakers were actually not American, they were Europeans. And he had not seen any European cinema. So he says, then I went to see their European films. And then he says that, he was able to learn a lot. He was also asked, he was a very candid man of, whatever we know of him. And he was also asked if he learned anything from Indian cinema. So now, of course, 55 is what we are talking and pegging at. And he said, yes, I learned a lot of what not to do in films. And if you see Ray's films very carefully, you will see the style of filmmaking there is extremely different and very original in that sense. So let's go to Ashok and take his views on Ray's relevance, because he is the dean of the film school, which is named after Satyajit Ray. Ashok, are you there?
Yes, thank you. I don't know how relevant that makes me, being the dean of SRFTI, but I'd like to take a leaf out of Arunaji's book and say that I find that Satyajit Ray is all the more relevant today, now that we're in the grips of a deadly disease, which is not just the physical disease, but many other kinds of diseases which seek to stifle our voices, often political. I think it's only art and culture that can actually rescue us from the morass that we have sunk into, the quicksand that we are gradually falling into. And Rai was symbolic of the open voice, the independent voice. Unfortunately, we find filmmakers and artists getting affiliated to one block or the other. But Rai was not like that. He was totally independent. He could criticize people who praised him, including critics. Now, the first point I'd like to make is that, again, taking a leaf out of Amit Ji's book, he was certainly a classical filmmaker. But he was not always all that classical, is what I want to say. He is regarded as a very good storyteller, but I can cite several examples where he's actually subverted the storyline. If you look at Pathir Panchali, for example, where is the story? Is it a traditional story in the sense of introduction, complication, crisis, climax, resolution? No. It's just episodes strung together, one after another, not following sometimes on top of the other. Kind of a pyramidal structure, which reaches its climax with Durga's demise. And then leaves you open, a kind of open-endedness, ambiguity, which the great film theorist Siegfried Kracauer said, that it is not a tragedy, because it leads into another area, another space. The characters are unvanquished, which is why the second part is called Aparajita. So that's my first point, that he's not just classical, he is able to subvert the narrative in Pathir Panchali, in Kanchenjunga. The film Kanchenjunga has certain existential themes which were prevalent in Europe in the 60s, but which were beautifully executed in a musical form known as the rondo, where certain elements are repeated. Again, nothing much happens. In fact, what was supposed to happen does not happen, like in Waiting for Godot. Godot never comes. Here, the marriage doesn't take place. So, this is the first point, that I find him relevant because he is classical and at the same time able to subvert the narrative. The second and last point, before you hand you over to the next speaker, is that all his films have such a strong sense of milieu, a strong sense of the environment and the zeitgeist, like in the Iranian cinema of Abbas Kiarostami or Mohsen Mahmalbaf. If you look at Pathir Panchali, it is so local and yet universal. If you look at his urban quadrilogy, films like Pratidwandi, Shimaboddo, Jono Orunno, Company Limited, they're also very much rooted in the urban setup, sometimes in the middle class, in the upper middle class, in the lower middle class. So he's very conscious of the milieu, and this is something which we must look at. As Arunaji said, we may know a lot of techniques, all grab bag of experiments, but cinema is not theater. In theater, we have the study of man. Theater studies man. And in cinema, you have the study of man in his environment. So that is very important, not just the milieu, but also the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. What are people thinking at a particular point of time? So these are my initial points, why I think he's so relevant to our context, why filmmakers need to study him, and why we still get a lot of enjoyment from seeing films of his again and again.
Ashok, thank you very much. I think you made your points very, very succinctly, and quite in the language that Ray speaks, which is also very nice. Dr. Jabbar Patel.
Yeah, I think now Aruna, Ashok, everybody has they have given the complete picture of Manikda, Satyajit Ray, we call it. And I think, as they say, I think he's a complete filmmaker. He had a complete command on the visuals, the frames, the detailing of the frames, and the pace of the film. I mean, that's the most remarkable thing ever happening to world cinema. Very few directors care the pace, the story they're telling. I think Manikda did it great, is keeping the pace of each and every story with the soundtrack. Perfect soundtrack, silence. And I mean, absolutely somebody would write to have a kind of a new textbook of, looking at his camera work, where exactly the crane will come, the trolleys will come, the long shots and close shot and extreme close shots will come. I mean, such a in-depth kind of a thing and understanding. I think they came because of the illustrated background. He is a wonderful illustrator. So his frames are completely pregnant of everything, and his soundtrack also. But why I'm still fascinated, which I feel because we call it legacy, I feel one thing very strong in him, which very rarely on Indian screen, though European cinema and American cinema, Latin American cinema, they have followed that. But Indian cinema, the great legacy which Satyajit Ray has given to us, the kind of a base of a literary work, the kind of conversion and transformation of the literary work he took from Apu trilogy to all the short stories of Sunil Gangopadhyay to Ibsen, the kind of literary work and that literary work to translate into the film medium. I think this is one of the rare contributions of Satyajit Ray to all generations in India. I think we really, really lack that. We have so much of Indian literature, rich in content, rich in genres, rich in texture, and also full of everything. I think we that legacy, main point I feel, that all his characters absolutely full with flesh and all the minute details. I think his work on the literary background was tremendous. That's what I want to have initial comment.
That's true, Dr. Patel. Actually, the literature that Ray picked is amazing, and it just is. Any literature that Ray picked to film, you can blindly say that that book is worth reading. And I've been reading Vibhuti Bhushan Banerjee's Pathir Panchali, and I can vouch for this, no doubt about it. Madhu, from your side.
Yeah, I think again, a lot of things have been said, and they are all very relevant. And maybe I can just put in what I would feel is, the conviction that he had as an artist is still inspiring. When he started,
mention one thing.
Yeah.
Because Satyajit Ray started making films. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Kedar sir, you wanted to say something, or shall I continue now?
Madhu, I think it's a good idea you continue because it's Kedar's turn next.
Yeah. Okay. So by conviction, what I meant is he started making films when neo-realism was prevalent, and that is when So, but he
I have an intermittent
made his point. Okay. So he made Mr. Ray made this clear that he's not a neo-realistic filmmaker. So he kept realism. He did work on realism, but he brought an austere aesthetic sense to realism. Like when he photographed things, when he recorded sound, there was a kind of selection, a kind of tonality for both picture and sound, where he also transformed the events, like events from literature. I haven't read the Bengali book, but one could feel an event can just can get contrived to be an event. But from that, it doesn't, in Ray's film, an event does not get contrived to an event, it just transforms. It transforms to something else. So it carries with us. Probably this happens because as he writes, he also is said to be making his notation, musical notations. He used to write music like people like Fellini, who had a composer to compose, or Sergio Leone, who had a composer by his side. So Ray used to do it himself. And so there was, from the scripting to the, even while shooting, and of course throughout, there is a kind of lyricism, a kind of poetry that is brought in. And therefore an event does not come as an event and gets finished there. It just carries on. So we get involved in the film in a much larger way. And it is a full journey from the beginning till end. And at every point, the narrative becomes the most prominent thing. And he kept himself rooted in Bengali culture and his own worldview of life and philosophy. Probably he had a strong feeling of strong sentiments about family and certain statements he had to make about relationship, which is there in almost every film one can see of Ray's. And something about sound was said, which we can also come to it later. But this one aspect of sound is that he kept being always rooted as a classical filmmaker. He kept sound with the picture. He always wanted it to be complementary. Except in a film, maybe once or twice, he would just take it to an emotional space of the character, rather than just making it expressive in a larger sense. But from beginning till the last film, to get rooted in one way of working and just be convinced about one's own kind of aesthetics, I think it's a great thing to get inspired about.
That's very true, Madhu. Kedar, your intermittent connection, if it is functioning well. Kedar, are you able to hear me?
I have an intermittent connection. Hello,
Yeah,
can
but
you
we
hear
can
me?
hear you. So if you want to speak, yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay, no.
Switch off your video, just speak. Then the audio will come
What
through.
we've been speaking and what Amit and what Aruna Raj have all been saying, you see, when the rest of Bollywood, for them, they had not even heard of scripts, man. They were living in that is the one thing that has really changed. Now you have people like Anjum and these people pakka about it. And I think this is one thing that Satyajit Ray insisted on doing right from day one. He do not have a viable script. And I think this is a very important point for us to remember, because the script writing. So when we are talking about Satyajit Ray and today, I would say one of the biggest things that has changed is that you do have script writing as a that early on. Okay, yeah, back to you, Pankaj and Amit, to say.
Kedar, thank you very much. And Santosh, before I go on to you, I remember you were quite a fan of Ray while in Institute also. And then you, of course, grew into a very eminent cinematographer and filmmaker yourself. So being where you are now, how do you look at Ray's relevance? Your mic is perhaps muted, Santosh.
You're speaking to whom?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think
Okay.
the relevance is very much there, actually, because I feel that most of what you learn from the Institute, we had a lot of people we looked up to. Ray is one of them, of course, Tarkovsky and everything. Visually, of course, Ray had some fantastic observation, when you look at the way he photographed rain or you could see texture in it, which nobody talks about when doing a visual. They talk about light, shade, composition, but in his films you could see texture, the texture of Bengal, I would say, because I had not gone to Bengal till then, and I thought through Pantar Panjali I actually discovered bits and pieces of Bengal. In fact, his relevance is so much that when I was doing a film called Iruvar, we decided to follow the kind of work Subrata Mitra used to do in terms of framing, but keep it like a moving camera. So we actually have taken a lot of inspiration from these people's work. So even though he's gone, I think a lot of students and people still look up to his work and find inspiration, and almost like they're your teachers. So this happens all the time, not just here. Even when I was in the Western world working with them, even they used to talk like that. So it's a very proud moment when you hear about Satyajit Ray's movies and things that they perceive in a very interesting way, and how everything comes out. So I think basically what I think he has contributed maximum is that he has inspired quite a few people all over the world, including mostly, I think in South, very much so. So that's what I would like to talk about, Satyajit.
Charulata is a film that you can see repeatedly and find new things. And 2-3 new things that I found, of late when I saw this. She's actually, she carries that binocular like a hammer. This is her tool, this is her weapon, this is her everything. In the film, repeatedly you will see this. So she's got one device from which she can bring people closer, and she attempts to bring that husband who's actually going away from her. She puts this and he, brings him back like this. And then there is a filmmaker with his zoom, which is who Ray is. And then Ray takes a shot of Madhavi Mukherjee and he pulls back like this. Because that distance through these devices is not getting bridged, and it's in 7 minutes he's just set up the film for you. He's so amazing, and it's a very beautiful story, and we will go into some detail of this story also. But I just want to go to Ashok and again pick that thing where you were saying the whole. I think a lot of people say Ray is a great storyteller, and no doubt he's a great storyteller. But I think you are very convinced that he's not just a great storyteller, but there are various other things in his films and in his narratives. And since you worked with some of the actors who acted for Ray, I also want you to talk a little bit about acting in Ray's film and handling of actors in Ray's films and all of that dimension.
Right. I'll just quickly talk about why I think that even in a film like Charulata, which seems a very classical story, it's based on Noshto Need by Tagore, and people have said that it's autobiographical, that it's about Tagore's relationship with Kadambari Devi, but this is disputed. But anyway, in this film, Ray has done a lot of transformation. He's transformed the text. In fact, both the book and the film, I would say, is a very early feminist work in a pre-feminist era. This is very important. In the book, Tagore ends with Charu's line, where she refuses to go with Bhupati. Because Bhupati, after having lost all his riches, and also knowing that he's been betrayed by his wife, in the novel, decides to take up a job in Mysore, which is a much smaller job, much below his station. And initially, he didn't want to take Charu with him. Charu wanted to go. But when he refused, Charu says, no, I don't want to go. He pleads with Charu. Charu says no. That no ends the novel. In the film, he ends it with this ingenious freeze shot where the two hands don't meet. You must remember that this is 1964, 4 years after the Nouvelle Vague or the New Wave broke. And both Mrinal Sen and Satyajit Ray were influenced to a certain extent, I would say, Truffaut's famous freeze shot at the end of Les Quatre Cents Coups, that is the 400 blows. Here the freeze shot is very effective because time stands still. We don't know what will happen to this broken nest. So in the way that he has interpreted, transformed, used cinematic technique, I would say that he has not stuck to the classical mold because the film is left hanging. It's a film that ends before ending. Like Chaplin's Great Dictator, it doesn't end. The person gives a speech, you don't know what will happen after the speech. Will those Gestapo kill him or what? but he's left it because that speech was so important. Similarly here, he's left it. So I would say that in Charulata, because of the structure, the dramaturgy, also that he moves away from the narrative into exploring Bangla literature, critiquing people like Bankim Chandra, and talking about how this lady Charu was so well read that she could even teach her brother-in-law or cousin-in-law, and in the process, of course, she falls in love, and so her desire, woman's desire, shown on celluloid in 1964, again, I would say, very, very forward. Now, coming to your second part, that is the handling of actors. Of course, Madhavi Mukherjee, I have worked in one of her films as an actor. I haven't been able to use her, but she's absolutely phenomenal in this film. I mean, absolutely incredible. She holds the film, literally, because here is a woman who knows her mind, And I would just like to very quickly take you through that last scene or the penultimate scene when they return from the seaside. They've gone to the seaside to mend, kind of, the relationship seemed to have got sort of fractured, and there's a mending of ways. As they come back, the camera is on a very low angle on a kind of a round table, very small round table. Camera cranes up, and we see a letter. It's almost as if that letter is going to cause something. Like in Shakespeare, you find that coming events cast their shadows before. In Merchant of Venice, Antonio says, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me, you say it wearies you. But how I caught it, found it, or came by it, I am to learn. And such a want with sadness makes of me that I have much ado to know myself." So now this letter is a foreboding. It's a letter from Amol. And Bhupati reads it very cursorily and tells Charu, "Read it, it's good news, He's coming back, he'll probably get married, He's agreeing to the marriage," and things like that. And Bhupati leaves. Charu comes in, and as she reads the letter, her pent-up emotions burst forth, and she kind of proclaims her love. And Bhupati had forgotten something. He came back into the room, and he heard everything, and the story is clear that he's been betrayed twice over, once by his own brother-in-law financially, and now his wife, is not adulterous, I would say, but she has affections for another man. So the whole working of it, the dramaturgy, the handling of the actors, so subtle. I think the single most important element in Ray's handling of actors is subtlety. I was present at one or two shoots as an observer for Shatranj Ke Khiladi, and later when Sandeep Ray did Guppy Bagha Phirelo, which is the adventures of Guppy and Bagha. And I found that his direction was minimal, usually. He would allow the actor to do his thing, but guide the person, never demoralize him if he didn't do it the way he wanted. He would say that, "Well, that's fine, but can we do it a little differently?" You can see that he has a very soft touch, spontaneous, allowing the actors to flower. So I would say that his handling of actors brings out genuine performances, not acting, but behaving. So General Outram behaves. Amjad Khan behaves. And Syed Jaffrey is the joker in the pack. In that film, he's absolutely brilliant. He adds his, effervescence, the naughtiness to it. So he will allow the actor to do his thing, guide him, and as you rightly said, the mise en scène, the way the camera moves, that is a part of his whole design. It's always a kind of camera character choreography that he's working on.
So, staying with Charulata, Ashok alluded to this India of 1964, and we are presenting our audience with a film like this in what would be a very male-dominated storytelling era. Arunaji, I just want to ask you if you see a distinction there in the way he's treating his women. Your mic is muted.
Yeah, definitely what he's saying is because, I mean, if you look at Pather Panchali and Charulata, for a moment, I'd like to look at both the films. They're worlds apart in terms of where they're shot and the kind of people he's talking about. But, you know, the detailing that he's done and the world that he's created in those times, you know, for women, it was a life of subordination. You know, if a woman child, a female child, had to be under the father's control, would go to the husband, would go to the son. And like women did not have a say of their own to do anything or to be anyone. Everything was designed what they could do and what they could not do, and they had to just be with the thing. Now it was nothing like self-realization, nothing like what I want, what I feel, or what we call selfhood. Nothing like that was possible for them. And sexuality was a very far cry, you know, to be even think of that. Now purity was very critical because that's how the, you know, patriarchy controlled the women. They had to be chaste and they had to be pure. And the other thing was women had to be seen and not heard. So they had to just not, even we were kids, we were told not to talk back to elders. I mean, here it was don't talk to your back to your husband or your whoever, you know, like that. And which meant that there are two things there where you had to keep quiet and suffer in silence and do whatever you're supposed to do, be the ideal wife, mother, whatever that was given to you. Or if you kept quiet on your own, it could be a sign of also, you know, you chose not to speak. You know, again, because it was like passive aggression. But the thing was, it could build up, it could be suppressed anger. But when you could speak a lot later on, as in Charulata, you see, I mean, you know, Charu's character, she speaks and she's very articulate. So when you look at the three female characters in Pather Panchali, you have Durga, Sarvojaya, and the elderly aunt Indir. Now, time is 1900s, nondescript family living in a nondescript Bengali village. And of course, patriarchy was there. So the thing was laid out for them who they are supposed to be. And the way, you know, the kind of empathy that Ray has shown, the way he's been with these characters, I mean, it's just so amazing. You are very much in that family and you see Sarvojaya walking, you know, working morning, noon and night, doing what she's doing. Her whole thing about maintaining the honor of the family, being very dignified and making sure that her children have something to eat, whether the husband is there or not there. And then there was Durga growing up. Now, one of the most beautiful things, see, Durga has not yet become that, you know, it's not a crowded village. Just people are not too many people there. And there is that beautiful forest and, you know, those orchards. And there's extraordinary scenes of Durga who is a complete free spirit. And that's how we all start out. You know, women, anytime you start out innocent, you start out absolutely free-spirited. And what happens? You know, and like, you know, all the scenes where she is traipsing in the orchards, she's stealing the fruit and she's hiding the fruit and all the mischievous things doing and the fun she's having at the pond in the rain getting wet, all that things is shown so beautifully and so really it's your experiencing that. And that's what also texture means for me, that you are experiencing, that you are in the scene. And that's what he's done. But what would happen, let's imagine what would happen to Durga. Durga will get married as a child bride sooner or later, and that's what. And then what will happen to her? She'll become Sarvojaya. So the trajectory is very clearly defined. She will become Sarvojaya and she has to look after husband and children. And then what happens as Indir? Indir is when it's all over. You're not required anymore. You're unwanted. You're on the shelf. You are discarded. And the character of Indir, the way he has created that character, again, so amazing. I mean, that old crone bent like that, and she's got a mischievous spirit. She's got a little naughtiness to her, a little mischief to her. And she cackles away and she does her thing, and your heart goes out to, I don't think Pather Panchali could be the same without Indir. It is so extraordinary. And he's created these experiences for you. Now, again, as I said, this could be a trajectory of three women that's going to be the same graph. Now, when it comes to Charulata, the whole scenario is different. Again, things have not changed very much, but people, you know, literature, Bengali literature has suddenly emerged in a very different way with Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Sarat Chandra Tagore. They're all begun to write about women empowerment, female emancipation, and things like that. And the literature is now beginning to find other kind of, if you ask what is the worthiness of a woman, the Renaissance that happened in Bengal, it was almost at the beginning of the 19th century, I think. And these women now, there could be feelings, if not voices, at least feelings could be there. And that's what brings us actually to Charulata. And if you see that scene, I don't know if many of you remember the scene in the garden. First of all, Charu is now beginning to look outside. She wants to connect to the outside world and see what is there. And this world is denied to her. Basically, the way society is just denied to her, she's protected, she has to be inside. It's not. And it's for the men to go out into the world, to see the world, to interact the world and be masters of the world. Now that's not available to her. So what is she? She wants to reach out. And here comes this young man who is a brother, cousin, whatever. And he's a footloose, fancy-free, young, charming fellow, talks literature right and center. And inside of that, he pointed something. With the way Ray has used this, there was an essay of Bankim Chandra, Women Old and New. Now, that was published in 1879. And there they are looking at what is the modern woman and the older kind of woman, who is a traditional woman. And actually, you will hear Amol talking about it. Now there's Manda. Manda is the other woman who is very sort of very earthy, sexually also very this thing, but she's not intelligent or intellectual, in a complete contrast to Charu. And Charu is well read. Charu has the arts. I mean, she paints, she plays the piano, and she's alone, but she's thinking. Charu is thinking. Charu wants to do something. She needs an outlet for her creativity or for her expression. And when Amol comes into the family, into the house, that's when she begins to. The first time she's actually expressing herself. What does she do? She laughs, she gets piqued, and she has little tantrums. She does all these things. You never see her doing any of this with her own husband. So there is no intimacy with the husband. Now, slowly, there is something we talk about, the male gaze. I'd like to say a little bit about that. The male gaze, if you look at it, it's always observing the kind of how women's bodies are looked at and how things are perceived. Now, nowhere, not in Pathe Panchali, not in Charulata, does Ray's camera actually look at women's bodies in that way. I mean, he has, that's why I say, I feel he has a huge respect for women and his huge respect for people. I mean, showing people as they are. Now, what happens is, in Charulata, the whole male gaze is subverted. What happened? It is Charu now who's looking outside. There is the garden scene, which everyone must see. I don't know if Pankaj can show it to you later, but there's time for that. But she actually begins to see this young man, Amol, and he doesn't know she's watching. And she's got her little lorgnette, and she keeps turning it all over the place, and she leaves the garden plants, and then she sees a neighbor standing with a kid, a woman in the balcony or something, and she's got a little child. And she becomes very sad, there's a moment of sadness, wistfulness. Now, she's not a mother, she's not had a child yet. And that's there. And then she again trains her lorgnette on this guy. He's now writing in the garden, he's writing, whatever. And she looks at him, and for the first time, you get the experience of the female gaze. Initially, it's very innocent. Like we all look at each other, it's very innocent. And then gradually you see the stirrings for the first time of something more. And the way Madhavi has performed in that scene, you know that what's happening, halchal, whatever you want to call it, the stirrings of that new experience of new feelings she never knew possibly she had living with Bhupati. And then something begins to come alive. And then she actually starts demanding his attention, demanding Amol's time. And Amol is, of course, he doesn't want to commit to anything. He's just having a good time. And though Amol is comfortable, very comfortable with Manda, but he doesn't have that with her. It's almost like they're, they're almost sparring, like, word for word, because both are well read, both have done their literature. So it's a very different ball game with her. And then she gets so kind of demanding, gets so attached to Amol. And in 1946, to understand that, the plight of this woman and the way he's used the male gaze, so to say, I think that's extraordinary. That's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, what can I say about it except that it's just, there's not that much time. I could go on and on with this, but it's really amazing the way he's been able to draw this woman out. Now, feelings are very personal and very private, but by the time you get to a stage where she clings on to him and she doesn't want him to go, the deed is done. And, it's like, and women have feelings. I mean, and that's what he's saying in 46. He's saying that. 64, he's saying that. And he's chosen this. And again, now, when the letter comes, as Ashok was saying, that letter which kind of really shows you that something terrible is going to happen now, something really, it's like. So, that, sorry. Until then, something is going on. Okay.
I think there's some very good news. Mohan ji has joined us, Mr. Mohan Agashe, and that's absolutely delightful, because I was hesitating to call Mr. Agashe because I know that he's busy with film screenings. So thank you very much, Agashe sir, for joining us. We will definitely want to include you in the conversation.
I just complete this
and we will, please complete. Aruna.
Yeah, so when she reads that letter, she doesn't read it. That letter that he's not coming back and he's going to get married breaks her heart, and she can't control her emotions any longer. Though she had tried to kind of patch up with her husband in a way and accept, but now it's like, but yet that's surprisingly what Satyajit Ray has done is, the husband goes away and he comes back and he stands at the door, not knowing whether he can come in or whether he'll be accepted. And now Charu puts a hand out. Charu puts her hand out. And that's a great understanding, I think, and kind of takes him back. Now, how that marriage will go is a different story, because this film ends at this point and there's another film waiting to happen, because that's not the end of that. So as Ashok also said, that's not the end, but there's another end if you ever make that what happens later. But the point is, with men and women, the relationships are fragile, and it hurts the male psyche definitely when, a woman's affections are somewhere else. But then, there is enough, there's a lot of adultery. We may not like to accept that. But the thing is, if men and women had to separate on the point of feeling for the other person other than your partner or just adultery, then a lot more marriages would break up. But the very fact that people learn to live with each other or accept, at least the beginning, I don't know, people still accept. And I think that's what he wanted, to leave it open. And yet at the same time, like, they probably will explore whether they can continue to live together or something like that. And I think that's extraordinary way. And I think when I think back 64, that time was such, and he's actually, both the films, if you see, he's done so much justice to the conversation and the conversation of feminism. So what is, it's amazing. I can only say that. And actually, I had a lot more to say, but I won't say it now. You've now got me, this subject is like a trigger for me. I can go on and on, but I will stop now and have you talk to other people. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, no, I think after what you have said, there is no way that we should not be seeing the garden scene. We must see the garden scene, because in any case, it is such a rare occurrence in Indian cinema, as far as the female gaze goes, of course, but in the way a director is handling that scene. So we will see this. I just need to tell you what happens in the scene prior. Arunaji has mentioned it also. They are inside a room where this manda is fluttering around continuously, and Amal is talking about the rhythms of life. So he's 23-year-olds, and he has some pretensions to have this artistic thinking. So he's talking all that, and then Charu says, "Let's go to the garden." She basically wants to exit the scene, and she seems to be assuming charge. So when they enter the garden, actually she is leading the way. You will see this from the very beginning. And if your volume is low, this clip actually has a low volume because it distorts if you increase it. But if you have headphones or if you can increase the volume, it's please listen to everything in this because the sounds are very low, but they are bang on, including the dialogues. Just hear the dialogues. She's talking of peacock, he's talking of Abhimanyu. It's amazing because these things are just, dropped there, and they will all have a very significant meaning as the film progresses. So let's just see the garden scene from Charulata. It's a 10-minute scene.
Ashok.
এই দশা হয়েছে বাগানে। আর দাদা বলছিলেন এখানে জাপানি কায়দের বাগান করবেন।
আর দাদা, কাগজ ছাড়া আর কিছু আছে নাকি ওর মাথায়?
এখান দিয়ে একটা খাল যাবে, তাতে কিছু পদ্ম আর কিছু হাঁস, তার উপর একটা সাঁকো আর দুপাশে কিছু ফুল।
আর ময়ূর থাকবে না? পেখম ধরে নাচবে?
না না, ময়ূর না, নো কেকার, তাতে কাজের ব্যাঘাত ঘটে। তাতে কিছু হরিণ শাবক থাকতে পারে।
I don't know, Yogesh ji, if you can hear me, this is lagging. The video is lagging.
ফেলা যেতে পারতো।
ঠাকুরপো, ও ঠাকুরপো, একটু দোল দিয়ে দাও না। একবারটি দাও, বাকিটা আমি দিয়ে দেবো।
নবীনা, এটা কিন্তু বাড়াবাড়ি হয়ে যাচ্ছে।
কেন বাবু, কি হয়েছে দোল দিতে?
দোলনার উপর ট্যাক্স বসছে, জানো সেটা?
ঠাকুরপো, ও দিগ্গজ বাবু, কি ভাবছেন?
ভাবছি
কি
লিখবো।
কি লিখবে?
ভাবছি
কি?
ভাবছি।
বেশ তো, ভাবো না, ভাবো আর লেখো, কিন্তু ও খাতায় নয়, আমি খাতা বানিয়ে দেবো। এই দোয়াত আর এই কলম।
হে আমার শুভ্র খাতা, আমার কল্পনা এখনো তোমাকে স্পর্শ করে নাই। যেদিন শেষ পৃষ্ঠার শেষ ছত্রে উপসংহার লিখিয়া দিব, সেদিন এখন কোথায়?
বাবা, খাতার কি গুণ, হাতে পড়তে না পড়তেই ভাব এসে গেল। একটা কথা দিতে হবে কিন্তু।
কি?
ওতে যা লিখবে তা ওতেই থাকবে, কাগজে পাঠাতে পারবে না, ছাপাতে পারবে না, কেমন?
অল রাইট।
ড্রেফট দিলে না?
থ্যাংক ইউ।
থ্যাংক ইউ, থ্যাংক ইউ, থ্যাংক ইউ।
ব্যাস, লেখা শেষ, খাতা শেষ।
এবার গপ্প লেখো।
কেন, এসব কি খারাপ নাকি? শোনো, অভিমন্যু যেমন গর্ভবাসকালে কেবল বুহ প্রবেশ করিতে শিখিয়াছিল, বুহ হইতে নির্গমন শেখে নাই। নদীর স্রোতে গিরিদরি পাষাণ জঠরের মধ্যে থাকিয়া কেবল সম্মুখে চলিতে শিখিয়াছিল, পশ্চাতে ফিরিতে শিখে নাই। হায় নদী, হায় যৌবন, হায় কাল, হায় সংসার, তোমরা কেবল সম্মুখেই চলিতে পারো। যে পথে স্মৃতির স্বর্ণমণ্ডিত উপলখণ্ড ছড়াইয়া আছে, সে পথে আর কোনো দিনও ফিরিয়া যাও না। মানুষের মনই কেবল পশ্চাতের দিকে ধায়, সমস্ত জগৎ সংসার সেদিকে ফিরিয়াও তাকায় না। কেমন হয়েছে তোমায় বলতে হবে, তোমার মতামত চাই। ভালো হলে কেন ভালো, খারাপ হলে কেন খারাপ, কি বলো? খারাপ?
খারাপ তো বলছি না,
তবে
বলছি এসব তো অনেক হলো। নদী, আকাশ, মেঘ, চাঁদ।
অনেক মানে সাহিত্যের আবার অনেক কি? আর লিখলে কি গল্প লিখতে হবে নাকি? এডিসন, স্টিল, এমারসন এরা গল্প লিখতেন?
আচ্ছা বাবা, আচ্ছা, তোমার যে ভালো লাগে তাই লিখো।
না, আমি আর লিখবো না, এবার তোমার লিখতে হবে।
ওরে বাবা,
কেন?
আমারও সব ভাবই আসবে না।
ভাবের দরকার কি, তুমি অন্য জিনিস লেখো। তোমার ছেলেবেলার কথা, তোমার গায়ে সেই নদী, গাজনের সং, সংক্রান্তি সেই মেলা, তুমি আমায় বলতে ना? মনে করার চেষ্টা করো, এবার না লিখলে দাদার কাছে আমায় কৈফিয়ত দিতে হবে।
কৈফিয়ত?
দাদা ভাববেন তোমায় আমি কিছু শেখাচ্ছি না। দাদা কি আমাকে বলেছেন যে তুমি আমার স্ত্রীর শিক্ষার ভার গ্রহণ করো, আমি তোমায় মাসে মাসে মাসোহারা দেবো? চললে কোথায়? আমি কিন্তু লেখা পাঠাবো।
So quite speechless actually every time you see this scene. But as they say in good script writing, in a scene, a good scene is a scene in which everything changes. The story moves entirely forward. So here she made one effort to actually get him, and it totally bombed. Just realized that this was just a setup. He was just following orders, and it completely जैसे कि गुब्बारे में से हवा निकल जाती है. That is how it happened. But as Aruna ji was saying, it's such a beautiful scene that he's lying there and she's floating over him like a butterfly. It's so amazing, it's like he's just lying there on the floor and she's beautifully floating over him. She's, it's so much in control. Such an amazing thing, Aruna ji, you have pointed out. Okay, so let's just move on.
I think you should ask Santosh to comment on it. It's some of the most exquisite imagery you are going to see in cinema.
Yeah, who's this? I cannot, I don't know who's talking now.
My name is Amit Tyagi. I'm talking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Tyagi, and Mr. Shivan, of course, is here. And there is a structure to this which we will follow. But I just wanted to go back to the Shatranj ke Khiladi part, which Ashok had alluded, and he was talking of the way the climax scene was structured. Do you want to talk a little bit about the climax scene of Shatranj ke Khiladi?
Who are you asking? Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll be very brief because there are lots of other people to talk. I just feel that people have said that it's one of the weaker films of Rai. They've also commented on the camera work to a certain extent. But if you look at the mise-en-scène of the last sequence, where they actually, while playing chess, they quarrel bitterly, and the one fires at the other, and that's when the Gori Paltan also comes in. I think that's very beautifully crafted in terms of mise-en-scène and dramaturgy, because the interesting thing about Shatranj Ke Khiladi is that it is a very symbolic kind of a story, you know. There are parallel stories, and the one seems a symbol of the other, a microcosm representing the macrocosm, you know. So in that sense, Ray is delving into hitherto uncharted territory, because being a very realist filmmaker, although not totally neo-realistic, he was generally dealing, with the exception of Gupiga and Bagabai, into realistic tracks. But here you have the two Nawabs playing with each other, being symbolic of the kind of lassitude that was permeating the capital of the Awadh region, and a Nawab who was very, and yes, he was also a Nawab, Wajid Ali Shah. The Mughal Empire was waning in practically its last legs at Bahadur Shah Zafar and others, but Wajid Ali Shah was more into music and dance and the creative arts, and his conflict with General Outram is foregrounded, and the British feel that he is effete and effeminate and not capable of ruling, that being one story. And finally, the entire ambience of Lucknow. So the way the whole structure, the content, that I found interesting. And in the last sequence, the lingering on the Gori Paltan, you know, see the elephants, then the horses. And that was very interesting taking on the part of Satyajit Ray. He had the long shot initially, then moving closer, showing the different, the army coming in, you know, relentlessly, inexorably. It creates a kind of an impact, you know. Sometimes Ray moves away from the story and goes into something almost documentary-like. If you look at Ashani Shanket also, in the last sequence, he moves away from the story and there is a text. That text is part of the story, describing what happened in the man-made famine. And there you feel a kind of emotion welling up within you somehow. He's able to bring out emotion by moving away from the story and almost in a documentary fashion, creating an aesthetic which is really moving.
Ray was in fact asked many times why didn't he make a Hindi film, and he always said that he can only make a film about a culture that he understands. This is, I'm saying, all through the 60s and much of the earlier 70s. But in fact, going back to Charulata, there is one scene where this Amal comes and he's humming something, just something at all. And that something is Jab chhod chale Lucknow Nagari. Now, what is the connection between this? He is a man who will eventually abdicate the woman. So it's on in Ray's mind. This Wajid Ali Shah or Lucknow Tehzeeb or First War of Independence is all in Ray's mind way back in 1963-64. And so eventually when he decides to make a film in Hindi, it is a film which is set in that era, 1 year before the First War of Independence. It's quite amazing. And he chose a Munshi Premchand story. And, you know, of course, we've been talking about Ray's sense of literature. And he picks up that story and again picks up that era, which is the second half of the 19th century. There is something about it. And as Ashok has said, this is the very nice two parallels going on. One set of Nawabs which are oblivious of their wives' existence. They are so preoccupied with chess. And on the other hand, this Wajid Ali Shah, who's so preoccupied with his Kathak and with his Ghazal and with his music, that he is also, you know, abdicated that responsibility of running his state, whatever it is.
I just wanted to say that the music also is very characteristic of Rai. Rai was a musician himself. And here, you know, there is a kind of emotional appeal to the music. And when you mentioned about Lucknow, the connection, in fact, Tagore had made a parody of Jab chhod chale Lucknow Nagari, which is very popular in Bengal, you know. and that was popular with the Bengali Babus. So he might have used Jab Chhod Chale in Charulata for that reason. Also, the famous singer and composer Atul Prasad, who is a parallel of Tagore, was an uncle of Ray. So he had this very strong Lucknow connection. And even as a young boy, he used to go to Lucknow. If you see Shyam Benegal's documentary, in that also he's talked about Lucknow. That's all.
So he stayed rooted. I think that was the thing. He's just made 2 Hindi films. And the second one was Sadgati, which is a film that I saw first day, first show, because it came on Doordarshan. And it completely blew me, that film. वो film अभी भी मैं देखता हूँ, तो it is such a telling comment on the state of society. And so a lot of people sometimes think Ray is not a political filmmaker and he stays away from politics in films like the films that we've talking about. Of course, he's Meg Hirak Raja Deshe type of films, and Pratidwandi and all other films. But if Dr. Patel is still here, what I want to ask Dr. Patel is he's taken initiative at one point of time to go and see Ray at work. And he went to see Ray at work at Raj Kamal, where the great Mangesh Desai was mixing Sadgati. So I just like to hear from Dr. Patel, what did he observe? What was his experience of that mixing room? Dr. Patel, your mic is off.
Am I on now?
You are on, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was expecting, Pankaj, that some other aspects of Satyajit Ray should come, like Santosh Sivan speaking about camera and all that.
They will all come, sir. They will definitely come.
नहीं, मेरा ये मतलब था कि जो मैं बोल रहा हूँ, that is the last stage of filmmaking. The re-recording of the film. And I felt that the other aspects of Manikda should be first spelled out. Especially if Santosh Sivan's comments are needed, then we can come to this point.
All right. So on popular demand, if Mr. Shivan is present, because I did let him go, I told him I gave him actually a time on which he should return. So I don't know. Santosh, are you still there?
If he's not, then I can talk.
Yeah, I think I will alert him when we go to that stage.
Okay, then it's okay. Do you allow me to speak about the last stage of the filmmaking?
You can, but it doesn't matter. I think we need to understand Ray as a person as we go along, because he celebrated his style of filmmaking. But how does he do his work?
Look, actually, I knew him personally because he came and saw Ghanshyam Kotwal in one of our Calcutta tours. And in fact, that was my first thing to know Satyajit Ray from Mumbai, or from Marathi filmmaker. There was a link of course, Smita and Mohan Agashe. Not in Mohan Agashe first, because Mohan Agashe also was much away from Manikda. It was way back when we performed Tripeni Opera and Ghanshyam in Calcutta. We just requested him to come. We were reluctant to come because he has seen one film based on Ghanshyam Kotwal play, which obviously I think he had not liked it. So he said, no, I don't want to see that play. I said, no, come and see the play. But he saw the play and he loved it. And I think there's a link to it because he saw something in Mohan Agashe as Nara Fadnavis and in Munshi Premchand's story of Sadgati, where even incidentally the character's name is also Ghasirao. The Brahmin name was Ghasirao. And so I think he cast Mohan Agashe, and that's how I was very happy. Manikda was in the hall, in the performing hall, and I was very lucky to have, you will surprise all, little away from our subject. We were very, very happy to have all these, Muralda, Asit Sen, all these people together, and also Manikda in the hall. So then the connection to Sadgati, so I knew personally him. And then Smita Patil told me that he's going to re-record Sadgati with Mangesh. So I asked Mangesh Da, can I just watch Manik Da working on re-recording? He said, why not? I said, no, but I must ask permission because normally one director working, one filmmaker working for the last stage of the film is not really ethical to go and attend that. So when I met Manik Da when he was just having tea, I said, Manik Da, can I have a request? He said, what is that? I said, can I attend your re-recording? He said, why not? Why are you asking me that? You're a friend. No, I said, no, that's not the point. Point is, it is not the custom in Mumbai. Oh, no, not for you. He said, come and attend. And there I saw two absolutely great people working on final sound. And it was a telefilm. But the way Manika was ready with all his tracks was amazing. And I knew the story of Sadgati because the background of making the film. What Svita was telling me that it was supposed to be in a very barren place. Manik Das sketched everything, illustrations, how he's going to shoot and all that. He had made all his actors know that it's going to be a very barren land. Unfortunately, what happened, one day before they came to the shoot, it rained very heavily in that place. Practically, it became all pouring with rainwater and whole thing got muddy. I think they were all surprised. The man who has designed the whole film into a barren land, how now it's become very messy. It can't be a very muddy thing. They thought it's going to be postponed. But the Manika said, okay, get ready, tomorrow we're shooting. And I tell you, normally we're known for his perfection, for his pre-work. So I was amazed to know this. So I asked him before entering the hall that, well, Smita and Mohan told me that you know everything that you sketch on paper, you have everything planned on the paper. How could in 1 hour or 2 hours you could change the whole thing? He said, Jabbar, basically I thought that it was not much change to me. I was talking to human beings and it was something about the human beings. So that change didn't come to me and I was prepared immediately. I sketched everything out and I did the film. So the point is having soundtrack of having something in the mind, very screechy kind of a barren land, the dead body with the Brahmin pulled out, with coming from a very muddy part, and all so many details. I was really surprised to see that a filmmaker has brought his own soundtracks. I mean, background music, okay, that everybody brings. But even the Follies, he's created all absolutely minute details. Even the dead body screeching had brought the sound. How a dead body can be taken into muddy thing and that whole sound, very screechy kind of a sound. Then he said, I have my own birds. Because normally Mangesh Da had thousands of birds in his recording as in archive. But he said, no, I don't want your all birds which are normally seen in Hindi films. No, I want my own thing. So this is the kind of perfection you bring. And I've seen so meticulous on the levels he was working. For example, this particular scene. He thought that Mangesh Da was being a little louder. He said, Mangesh, please, put it down. I don't want this to be loud. And Mangesh Da said, Manika, please listen to me. Where are you going to show this film? In which theater? Manika said, it's for the television and maybe going to festivals. So Mangesh Da said, look, I will have 2 different sound negative tracks. One for theaters in Calcutta, where I have something on my own reading, which you take blindly and show there. I'm going to put it high because I know the quality of the movie theaters, single theaters then, and the kind of sound recording, the sound playing they have. It's very, very bad. So you have this a very high quality, high level. Then for television, okay, it's a television medium, I'll give you optimum. But for your festival, a very different kind of thing. So this is what the whole understanding, I could understand this. I mean, I could see that it's a 1 hour film. And for him, still, it was like any big film. So the way they both worked together, I was really overwhelmed to see that. So it is kind of a human side of Manik Da. And I tell you not because I'm not going to be much into the whole this discussion here. I must tell you that when there was a problem with Gasiram sending abroad, it was Manik Da to tell then Prime Minister Mrs. Indira Gandhi that Indiraji, this play has to go. That's such kind of cultural kind of put up, and he was so worried when there was all things going on whether Gashiram goes abroad or not. His ban is coming and all that. So he was worried. And he took the initiation and then he said to direct Prime Minister, please, this play must go abroad. And when I had some laurels, I had Padma Shri. So Mrs. Gandhi told me one thing, when are you leaving Delhi? I said, maybe tomorrow. She said, do one thing now, Jabbar. Thank one person, because this Padma Shri to you has come from your success of Gashiram European tour. One person responsible sending your play abroad. I said, who's that? And whom shall I thank? I said, call Manikda and give him thanks. He persuaded me and told me that this play must go. See the kind of human depth this man had for others' works. That was the great thing of Manikda. And I called him in Delhi. I said, Manikda, thank you very much. He said, why? I said, I got just some kind of Padma award, and Mrs. Gandhi told me that I must thank you because you're responsible for sending Gashiram abroad. Oh no, why she told you this? No, it was very personal between her and me. It's okay. See, this is what happens. I mean, he's not a great filmmaker. He was a great human being, a great concern for other filmmakers, other actors, theatre, music, and you can see his all work. See Jalsaghar, his kind of fascination for Indian classical music, kind of folk things he wanted to know. All details. That's why hats off to Manikda and his great memories. Pankaj, thank you very much for giving me this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Patel. No, this was really required because we need to understand the human before we understand the artist. And what you have said is something that is the impression that I have formed reading and hearing Ray over a period of time, that he was a superb gentleman. And sometimes I think, he was such he came from a highly cultured family. He's himself so cultured and so artistically rich. I think people who reach that stage do become good human beings, and that's the biggest thing, because not only did he make great films, I think he left a great mark on everybody who worked with him and everybody who saw his films. But you talked about
Pankaj, see the greatness of this man. In his writing, he has said he saw Jhanak Jhanak Payal Baji, Chandana Babu's film. I said, what a film! He loved it. He said, I must mount a film like this on dance drama or something like that. And he dreamed. And finally, what he dreamed came out at Jalsaghar. So what to him, Jhanak Jhanak Payal Baji, such an extravagant kind of work, and a great work, of course, in Kathak. Ultimately, Manikda had some kind of a core, catching a soul of music, and kind of the whole genesis of the whole thing. He came out in Jalsaghar. And what a gathering of the people, Begum Akhtar coming in, Amir Khan, so many people coming here. And it shows his in-depth study of the Indian musical culture. And that's what he was. I'm very frank. He said he wanted to make Jhanak Jhanak Payal Baji. And he said, oh, look, I landed as Jalsaghar. That was my Jhanak Jhanak.
There is also another interesting story, is that Aparajita was such a failure that he said, let me just drop this and make some commercially successful film. And he made Parosh Pattar. And after that, when he's making Jalsaghar, he's saying, so I wanted to make a song, a musical. But so I tried making that musical, and then it became Jalsaghar. This is exactly what he says. Exactly. So he wanted to make some commercial, but again, it became also very.
Yeah, this sequence I remember very distinctively watching it in Film Institute, and it haunted me the whole night, because I think here is a sequence which complements the visual and the music very, very interestingly. I remember reading or listening to something which Satyajit Ray was talking about Indian music being very decorative. Same way I think with all our cultural influences, the visuals also, when the Indian cinematographers film, there is a visual quality which is also decorated. And here I think it is a very beautiful blend of both. especially when you see the mirrors which signify metaphors of a flashback. A person, the servant who has come with a lamp lit, now it's off after everything is off. So I think it's a beautiful sequence where without musicians playing, you get a enchanting feel of era gone by, and all this music is played out just by this amazing actor and the way the camera moves around it. So I think for me, this sequence has always haunted me, like some of the sequences in Charlata, as some of the most amazing sequences which you can reflect over and over again, I feel. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
I think your mic is off, Pankaj. Your mic. Switch on your mic.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I got carried away with that, Jalsagar. No, I just wanted to ask you your take on this whole conversation of direct light versus bounce light, and Ray's contribution to it, and Subrata Da's contribution to it also. I mean, how do you see that in terms of where we are today?
I think, Subrata Da's work is exemplary. In fact, most of us have learned by seeing these films, and we have tried to take it from there, because bounce lighting in Charulata is one of the finest examples of bounce lighting, actually. It is an amazing quality that has been brought up. And Subrata Da, for that matter, I feel also was very much very good at getting the natural elements right, for like rainfall, the rain season, the kind of light. So the observations that they put in is fantastic, which is why they have been able to resonate with the Western audience as well, because there is a kind of love and caressing of the way the lighting is done, which I think for every cinematographer is a very important thing, to feel the images actually, whether you're doing a commercial film or a artistic film or whatever. I think basic thing is to catch all the navarasas in lighting, so just like an actor has different emotions, I think light also has very different emotions. There's nothing called good or bad. Direct lighting also can be very good. So is soft lighting, but it is to arrive at one navarasa for one film, which makes it very interesting. So that is what we try to do when we actually shoot a film. So I think if you look at direct lighting, V.K. Murthy was a genius at that, actually, amazing, with the kind of shafts of light that he used to use and things like that. Because you feel that for a cinematographer, lighting is a very big tool. And I feel most people treat it as like a navarasa themselves, Even though in Bollywood, they might just need the glamour rasa for that particular thing. But the fact is that cinematography is aided by all these lovely rasas in lighting, so there's nothing, so soft light is one of them, actually. Yeah.
I also want to pick your brains a little bit about these objects, these lit objects inside the frame, which we see in Ray often. And whether they are candles or whether they are lamps or whether they are lamps which go off, somebody walks with a candle, or even reflections in water, those kinds of things. And how do you see that?
I think one of the finest example was, I feel, that has of course stayed with me for a long time, is in Pattar Panjali when the rain comes. Okay. And the rain comes, and then it is a metaphor which the rain is enjoyed by Durga, and later maybe it is a cause of death, So it has gone through a whole circle, the whole thing. So I think all these kind of observations, it will reflect on you at a second viewing, third viewing, but just like you people were saying, always when you look at it more closely, the film visuals are so layered that you can actually get something from it each time you look at it, I feel. So I think that way, I think his observation on nature, whether it is a film like Sonar Kela or so many films, actually, I'm unable to name quite a few, but the fact is that there is always something that you learn from, I remember one shot of him crashing open a glass and his distorted, reflections on a mirror. I don't know which film it is, but these are visuals that stay with you, which is very interesting. It is almost like a signature on it.
That's true. And this sequence that you, unfortunately, I don't have that clip, but this Durga's death sequence and the impact of weather very quickly, the wind is so strong that it is almost breaking the doors, and she has to pull that box that trunk inside her house to keep those doors closed, because chill breeze is coming, and the doctor has said save her from chill. And eventually, as you correctly saying, it's a rain that she enjoyed. It's a rain
Yeah,
that
yeah. Not only
eventually.
it's almost a metaphor for death, the wind coming, I feel, It's almost is trying to break into it. So he used the wind that is always accompanies the rain too, as a metaphor, I feel, which is a very interesting kind of, and it's an amazing sequence, actually,
Yeah, I sometimes maybe erroneously, but I see expressionism, impact of expressionism there, because while it is a realistic film, there is a point when there is that Ganesha statue is casting a very stark shadow, and then the statue itself, because of the breeze, starts shaking like this. And that is the image for those poor people that they will hold on to. And if that image starts shaking, and because the lamp is static, you can see that whole shadow shaking like this in the background. It's a very scary and very foreboding mood in that.
Yeah, very true, very true.
All right, so let's then proceed to the other aspect of Ray, which doesn't get much discussed, and which is his editing. Because again, I think all good editing is so invisible that you don't, if you don't notice editing, then that's good editing type of a thing. But we have a very, very experienced editor from my time. He was my senior, Amit Tyagi ji. He's an editor who, as I mentioned in the introduction, has worked as an editor. He's worked as a filmmaker. He's done short films. He's done long films. He's done fiction. He's done non-fiction. So vast experience. So I just want to understand how Amit, and I know that Amit was a very, very serious viewer of Ray in FTII. So how do you see, I mean, after so many years, and after it's 30 years since Ray made his last film, how do you see his editing?
First thing, correction. I still watch Rai as seriously as I ever did.
I'm sure.
I do end up watching one Rai film a month, no matter what the hell I say. Okay, I'm actually not the right person to be talking of editing. The right person would have been Aruna ma'am, who's a national award-winning editor, much more accomplished, first female technician from FTII. So I feel a bit embarrassed to be discussing editing when Aruna ma'am is still around. But let's proceed and do that. What I have done is, see, when you talk of Rai, especially today, when you can almost all his Ashok, what is the exact term he used to use for those fat books? Keror Khata?
Yes,
all those famous Keror Khatas of his with his sketches of the images have all been digitized and are all available at the National Digital Library. In fact, I checked one yesterday for the sequence in Shatranj that we are going to discuss. Now, when you have the access to that kind of resources, you can probably check Rai's films much more closely today than we could as students. Because remember, I'm talking of a time when Rai was still alive, and I don't think he would let anybody see his Keror Kata in a hurry. Shatranj is a very underestimated film to me for another reason. It's one of the few films in India which actually openly deals with sexuality in a way in which Indian cinema rarely does. I mean, not just at that time, but not even today. And this is without showing you anything more than the person's face. Okay, there's no nudity or sexuality as such, because sexuality is all in the eyes and in the brain eventually. And Rai shows you that beautifully in this particular film. We've been calling it one scene, but it's actually, if you go by classical Hollywood or European classification of scenes, there's actually three little scenes within one. Because, I mean, in the classical sense of the word, every time a space changes, there is a new scene. So here, you begin with Sanjeev Kumar's house, the first scene. The second scene clearly is the hall where the chessboard is kept. And the third scene, obviously, is where the old man dies and you hear the crying of the thing. So what I'll do is I'll just go over the scenes one by one to just make it a little clear. I realize it's been a little long, so I'll try and keep it short. Ashok, just correct me if there's anything wrong I say. Okay?
Okay.
The first thing you need to see is when Saeed Jafri enters the house and there is Sanjeev Kumar ranting, and you have this longish tracking shot from Saeed Jafri's side, and till the end of the shot, you don't know where he's taking you. And the shot sort of ends in a draw because Jafri Saab sits down in dismay. He just doesn't know how the hell are they going to pass their time now that they don't have the chess pieces. So they are kind of stuck. Now you have to show Sanjeev Kumar's whole anguish about it. So what does Mr. Rai do? He goes into a slightly lower angle. Okay, he goes into a slightly lower angle, that here is this guy who's overtly the Nawab, who's the most powerful man in the house, and here is he doesn't know where the hell the chess pieces are in his own house. They've just disappeared. Now this comes just after he's established for you the sheer lack of knowledge or innocence or whatever is the term you wish to use for Saeed Jafri, not knowing that it's a Friday, not knowing that the markets are closed, which obviously implies this is evening. So these guys have not been near the damn mosque either. So they're very far away from religion and the realities of the world. Rai is like layer by layer, step by step, establishing that for you. And that is what you need to see in the sheer level of craftsmanship that he brings into the whole scene. And then, of course, when you have these masterly actors with their eye movements, they can convey so much to you. Like when you see Jafri Saab reacting when Sanjeev Kumar says, you remember the lawyer and the left side of his house, and the Jafri Saab doesn't quite connect, but the moment you see his eyes lit up, you don't linger on that scene anymore. You go to that chessboard. Now, when you see the film a second time, you realize that this chessboard is purely a decorative piece because they're both white colored pieces. They're not even a black colored pieces in that chessboard. So it's not designed for playing chess at all. It's just probably made of ivory and cost a huge pile of money and is kept somewhere just to show that you're a rich man. And yet these guys are so desperate that they are ready to play chess with that. And then you have the beautifully timed, that you see the contrast. When you do the first scene, you do long shots, you do a lower angle dimension of Sanjeev Kumar, you kind of look down upon Jafri Saab a little bit. But by the time you come on to the second scene, they're a team. You always see them together until they begin playing chess. That is the only time when Jafri Saab looks at him and Sanjeev Kumar looks back at him, and Jafri segment of the thing. That's always in full frame. There is another very interesting thing which happens here. In the scene when Agha Sahab comes and tells them about the father being very sick. Now he's talking, and while he's talking, in the same line of dialogue, Rai actually changes between three different shots. Between that guy's face, that guy's over shoulder of these guys, and these guys is long shot without him. And he's playing that whole thing of the emotions, complex emotions which are coming out, and that is the way he brings them out. After that, now look at what happens in the third sequence. When they enter to the lawyer's room, by now they are not two people, they are almost one person. Even though it's Jafri Saab doing the talking, they're literally one person. They don't even look at each other, they know instinctively what to do. They are a team by now. And that is what he's trying to establish. And you need to see these craft aspects of Rai very, very clearly. There is the other side of it, of course, that when you talk of people who are great humanists in cinema, what is the meaning of the term humanism? It means that every character, every minormost character gets the same attention from them as the major characters. And it's something very beautifully illustrated in this scene, because the lawyer is a character you are not going to see again. Neither are you going to see his son. You're not going to see his servants, of course. So but what is happening? At that moment, when you see them, they are performing a function in your script, in your story, in your overall filmmaking. And yet, in front of your eyes, he etches them clearly and completely transparently. You feel like you know Aga Sahab, who's you've seen for the first time, as much as you know Jafri Sahab, whom you've seen for about 20 minutes into the film by then. That is the beauty and uniqueness of Rai, that every character which comes on screen eventually comes alive for you. And that's something he does wonderfully well. I'm not going to bore you with details of cutting, but we've gone through this scene a few million times, right, Pankaj? Okay, let me not tell. Yeah, Ashok,
may I add one? This particular scene is, in a sense, apart from the stories, and this is the greatness of the filmmaker. It's very much similar to if you've seen a film of the Coen brothers called Fargo. In Fargo, there is that one scene when the Frances McDormand character, the heroine, the detective, she talks to an old college friend of hers, and that college friend says that, he tries to come close to her, and then she asks him to sit on the other side. And that scene is not spoken of again. It's not related at all with the narrative, but it's there. It adds what you said as humanism, emotion. And this scene is that. It's a very emotional scene, and that is the greatness of Ray.
No, but there is one more part of this scene which actually Madhu and Kedar are the guys to answer. It's a unique scene where he uses complete tabla sounds to underline the actions. Using the tabla to add the comic touch into the heaviness of the scene where a guy is dying. So you can't have a light-hearted scene, and yet in the musical tone, he adds that lightness of tone. Madhu, batao. हाँ, केदार बोलेगा और तुम बोलो.
Yeah. Speak. Madhu, you want to go ahead?
Sorry, Amit and Madhu and everyone. Just before we go there, I saw Dr. Agashe's hand raised. So I must defer to Dr. Agashe. He joined us some time back.
Yeah, please.
And if he's still around, Dr. Agashe, are you still there? Before we move to the sound part.
No, there's just one thing I did want to mention.
Sorry. Okay, so I don't think Dr. Agashe is there right now. If he does come back, then I think we will certainly want to hear him. But what you're left with now are two more sections. One is on Ray's music, which is what Kedar is going to talk about, and then his sound design, which is what Madhu is going to talk about. So I'm wondering if we should take the music part first, because that becomes a part of sound design. So Kedar, do you want to go then?
I just want to, at some point, I think, Pankaj.
Kedar, do you want to talk about music in Ray's film?
Yeah, well, I mean, to begin with, Pankaj, he made about, 26, 27, 28, I don't know how many. One on Rai and music, but just, should we say, he was never dogmatic about the use of music. And the tabla sounds that you heard in Shatranj Ke Khiladi were the milieu of these two gentlemen who play chess. They are not meant for comic relief. Just as if you see Shonar Killa, when you see Jodhpur Fort, there is virtually a joyful burst of music which is appropriate for eye and music. I think we should do it in a greater depth. If at some point we can do that, that would be nice.
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea. Thank you very much. I think there is entire world of raised music, and it'll be a fantastic session. There is no doubt about it. So then shall we
to just sort of pigeonhole him and say, oh, he used to do things on the piano, oh, he used to do this. But what he actually is, a person I have ever seen in his films. He will always surprise you with his music. To begin with, the question everyone on Indian tune, on a classical instrument in his famous, the first of the Apu trilogy, what's it called? Pathe Panchali. Begin there somewhere. But I know that this is not probably the moment for it. But at some point, Pankaj, you might think of having something centenary. So I'm just putting this in your head as a possible idea.
It's entered my head, Kedar, and it is going to stay there and culture itself. And we will definitely do a longer program. But let's go on to Madhu then. And Madhu, apologies that it's become so late. But I'm sure you enjoyed the conversation and what everybody else said, because you're a keen student of cinema. Let's talk of Ray's sound element.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed. I've been enjoying it, listening to everybody. Now, talking about the sound element, I think Ray had an idea of sound right from writing the script. That means if somebody is going to notate music, and that too he apparently wrote sometimes in Indian, letters, or sometimes he wanted to do like a staff notation and things like that. But when a person is writing music along with the script, it also means that he's aware of the sound. Like if the scene has a market, then he knows this market sound. If the scene of the Ghats, Benares Ghats, then he knows that there are these people. I mean, he has a choice of having those sounds, like of the prayers of people, bathing, people going the steps, and people calling out each other. He has a choice of what sounds he needs. But then if he wants to use music, then he also has to consider, what are the kind of tonalities that are already there in the scene. Now, this makes very clear how he selects his tone. So, whether we look at Pathe Panchali or we look at Aprachito has a whole lot of sounds because of Benares and that whole area. Even the small house where they enter, there's this water tap and the people going and kids playing. All these sounds, along with the sitar that would come, the instrument that is used, and the kind of sounds, and the selection of sounds. It's like when we have the Ghats, it doesn't mean that we are hearing everything that is there. There is a definite selection we can vaguely hear what is the person talking. We can also hear if somebody is doing there's a small group doing a prayer there. This kind of discrimination happens in the long shot from the soundtrack. Now there's a particular scene which we will see. Now this is part of Aranya Din Ratri. In that, there is this, we have a fair, the Mela, where all of them go. And that is where these four men, all of them meet their passion or their love. So what somebody is meeting, somebody is proposing, another person is sort of trying to just figure out, whether he can propose or what the scene is with this girl. There's another person making love, and there's another person who's gambling. So everybody is in love with what they want to do. And we have the Santal music because it's a market and they have this Santal dance happening. Now, Ray also sometimes he's put music on the Santal music. I mean, he has added instruments on that. Or there's a time when they're talking about Kolkata and things like that, there's a different kinds of the music shifts to, or that in that particular scene, in that point, we'll see the music is a composed music. Then slowly it comes to Santal music. There's this point when they are, when Hari and Duli, when they are sort of making love, and there's this camera tracks, and there's this one drum beat, the same Santal drum beat that will go on, dang, 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 and it goes and momentarily stops for the person, at a person who's spying, and then there's a dance happening. Now, what is interesting is, this whole varied kind of sounds, whether it's music or the sounds from location, and all of them coming in a period of this, the sequence is about 13 minutes, what we are going to see. Now, all these things are, these varied things are coming, but still they are coherent. And probably now, because we are seeing it from a point and we are talking about it, we will see the, these differences. Otherwise, in the film, all that we do, what happens is that, we have the attention on this girl at, in the marketplace because Hari is looking at her, or we see the spying man, or our attention goes to the importance of, being in the importance of the values of life when they are talking, during the conversation, the sounds change, the location, sounds from the location, or the location, or apparently it's established, it's established very clearly there is about this group moving in the Santal group moving with drums. Now, getting those sounds and in a certain way, it goes up and down in such a way during the conversation. So when there is a talk about values of life, you have a certain kind of sound that happens. And then when it's going to Kolkata and those kind of things, there's another thing happening. So our attention keeps shifting to the point where, Ray wants us to be attentive. Now, this is, I think, we can just see the scene and then we can see if there's anything we need to talk about. So, Yogeshji, if you're there, we can see this Aranyar Din Ratri.
The Mela scene, it's a 12-minute scene.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, you might need to increase your volume to hear these sounds.
Yeah.
Hello. So the film name and the scene name?
The Mela scene.
Aranyar Din Ratri, the Mela scene.
বাহ, দারুণ দেখাচ্ছে কিন্তু। কলকাতা অবধি টিকলে ওসব কি হচ্ছে?
মানে
কবে চুরির দামও দিতে পারবো না? ব্যাগ বন্ধ করুন। আচ্ছা, আপনারা আমাদের কতটা জঙ্গলি ভাবেন বলুন তো?
আরে এরকম করলে তো আমাদের কেনাকাটা বন্ধ করে দিতে হয়।
কত কিনবেন কিনুন না, এ তো নিউ মার্কেট নয়। হ্যাঁ, আচ্ছা এই যে দেখছেন ঠাসা একবার।
অসীম, এই 10 টাকা দিন। কেন? না, ওই 3টি স্টক দেবো, গ্যারান্টি। 5টা ফেলে এসছি।
কোথায় ফেলে এসছো? কলকাতায়?
নাই,
আমার কাছে আছে।
না না না, আপনি দেবেন না, ও জুয়ো খেলবে।
জানি তো।
না, ও দেবে, ও রিফিউজ করে না, খুব জেনারেস। দেন 10 টাকা। So kind of you.
এই হরে কোথায় রে?
যাই না, খুঁজে নে।
আরে আপনার ব্যাগ তো খালি হয়ে গেল।
না, এখনো তেলে ভাজা খাওয়াতে পারি।
সেটা যদি আমি খাওয়াই?
কোনো প্রশ্নই ওঠে না। চলো।
বৌদি, তোমরা তো এখানে আছো।
আরে আমার টাকা
টাকা তো রয়েছে।
তোমার কেনা শেষ হতে তো ফিরে আসবো।
নিহাতি নিলেন?
আমরা কিন্তু চলে যাব, তোদের দেরি দেখলে।
আপনাদের বাড়ি তো এখান থেকে 10 মিনিট।
আরে না, আপনি তো জানেন না আমার পুত্র।
বেশ লাগে না?
আপনি না থাকলে কিরকম লাগতো জানি না, হয়তো আসতে হবে।
আপনাদের ওই বন্ধুটি কোথায় গেলেন?
ওর আপনার কোম্পানি পছন্দ হয়নি। আপনার মতো মানে আপনার ধাঁচের একটি মেয়ে ওকে লেঙ্গি মেরেছিল। লেঙ্গি বোঝেন তো?
বুঝি।
আপনি এগোন, আমি খাদ্যদ্রব্য নিয়ে আসি।
আমি তোকে মারবো।
কেন গো?
তুই কাল রাতে আসিসনি কেন?
কোথায়?
কোথায়? ওই সেদিন যেখানে বসে বসে রস খাচ্ছিলি।
কাল নাচ হলো যে।
নাচ চলেছে? তুই আমাদের বাংলা কিসলি কেন ছাড় দিতে?
বাবুজি টাকা দিল, টাকা দিলে কাম করবো নি?
টাকা দিলে কাজ করতে হবে।
হবে তো?
না, আমি তোকে টাকা দেবো, আর এমনি দেবো। হ্যাঁ, অমনি লোভ লেগেছে। আপনি চললেন? দারুণ স্ট্রেংথ অফ মাইন্ড।
ভয়ে চললাম, আর খেললেই হারবো।
নিন।
বৌদিকে দিয়েছেন?
উনি খাবেন না।
আর আপনার বন্ধু?
ও খাবেন না। ওর অঙ্কের তাকিয়ে থাকে তো সত্যি কথাটা বেরিয়ে পড়বে।
আপনি যাননি ওদের কাছে?
দিন রাতে তো বৌদির সঙ্গে থাকেন, একদিন একটু আমার সঙ্গে থাকুন না।
আমি কি পালিয়ে যাচ্ছি?
আপনার সঙ্গে কয়েকটা কথা ছিল।
বলুন।
এখানে কথা বলা যায় না, চলুন মেলার বাড়িতে।
একবার বাংলাতেও যাবার দরকার, চশমাটা ফেলে এসেছে। চলুন। বলবেন বলুন।
আপনি আজ ইচ্ছে করে হারলেন, তাই না?
ওই নামগুলো এখনো আমার মনে আছে। আপনার আছে? ওটা আমার একটা বিশেষ ক্ষমতা। আমার 2 বছর বয়সের কিছু কিছু ঘটনা এখনো আমার মনে আছে।
তাহলে হারলেন কেন?
সেটা আপনি বুঝতে পারছেন না? আমি জিতলে কি আপনার খুব ভালো লাগতো?
সেই তো হয়েছে মুশকিল। একে সেই কুয়োর পাড়ে স্নান, তার উপর কনজারভেটরের হুমকি, বেইজ্জতের একেবারে এক শেষ।
আরো আছে স্যান্টাল টুইস্ট,
আপনাদের গাড়ি ছিল?
কি খেয়েছিলেন বলুন তো?
আর আপনি সেটা দেখছিলেন?
গিলছিলাম।
অসম্ভব অন্যায়। স্রেফ দৈব দুর্বিপাক ছাড়া আর কিচ্ছু নয়। বিশ্বাস করুন, আমি আর যাই করি না কেন, লোক হাসাই না।
কিন্তু তাও বলবো, আপনি ছেলে মানুষ।
আপনিও বলছেন ছেলে মানুষ?
বাংলাটা যেভাবে দখল করলেন সেটা ছেলে মানুষই নয়।
আপনার কি ধারণা আমরা আগে থেকে চিঠি লিখে বাংলাটা রিজার্ভ করতে পারতাম না?
তবে করলেন না কেন?
আপনাকে নিয়ে আর পারলাম না।
নিয়ম ভাঙতে খুব ভালো লাগে বুঝি?
সব সময় নয়, মাঝে মাঝে। আপনি তো চাকরির জ্ঞানাকালে পড়েননি। আপনি কি করে বুঝবেন নিয়মের কি খেলা? নেহাত আপনারা ছিলেন বলে, নইলে আমরা তো ঠিক করেছিলাম দাড়িটা অব্দি কামাবো না।
কিন্তু ফিরে গিয়ে তো আবার সব নিয়মই মানতে হবে।
তা তো হবেই, নইলে মাসের শেষে মাইনেটা আসবে করতে।
আপনার মাইনে ঠিকই আসবে। আপনি তো আর ঘুষ নেননি, ঘুষ দিয়েছেন। ভাবনা হয় চৌকিদারটার জন্য।
আচ্ছা, শেষকালটা চৌকিদারের কথা আপনার কাছ থেকে শুনতে হলো? ওটা রেঞ্জার বলুক, কনজারভেটর বলুক, চৌকিদার নিজে 500 বার বলুক, কিন্তু আপনি বলবেন কেন? ওটা আপনি বললেন না প্লিজ, ওটা আপনাকে মানায়। আসছেন যে?
ভাবছি কালকে আপনারা যখন ব্রেকফাস্ট করছেন ততক্ষণে আমরা রাঁচি পৌঁছে গেছি।
মানে?
কালকে রাঁচিতে গিয়ে শুনলাম কলকাতায় আমাদের এক বন্ধুর হঠাৎ বিয়ে ঠিক হয়ে গেছে। কালকে আমরা চলে যাচ্ছি। মরে গেল।
মরে গেছে?
কে জানে কোথায় খুবকা হয়ে জমাইছি আবার। উনি গেছে কাঠ কাটতে, আর সাপ এসে
সাপে কামড়ালো?
উখরো নাকি?
This is the perfect example of a syntagmatic structure in which there are parallel strands which are existing on their own but also impinging one upon the other. And the second point, which was already mentioned by Madhuji, is the dialogue, which we haven't mentioned so far. Ray's tremendous facility with the dialogue, his sense of wit, sometimes even the absurd, which comes in Agantuk, the last film, you know. In fact, Ray's father was a great absurdist, Sukumar Ray, strongly influenced by people like Lewis Carroll, you know, the famous Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. To just quote, there is one scene in Through the Looking Glass in which there's a mock turtle, you know, with a very deep, hollow voice. And the mock turtle tells Alice, you know, we were taught by a very old turtle, but we called him Tortoise. So Alice says, why did you call him Tortoise if he was a turtle? We called him Tortoise because he taught us. For the first time, we had 8 hours of lessons. The second day, we had 7 hours. The third day, we had 6 hours of lessons. Alice says, why? Why so? 8 hours on the first day, 7 hours on the second day. That's why they're called lessons, because they lesson from day to day. So this absurd streak was there in Sukumar Ray. And I think this has influenced Ray's dialogue, you know. There's a dialogue in Agantuk in which Utpal Dutt, the character played by Utpal Dutt, he is a coin collector, you know. And this is a kind of a Bengali English pun. And they ask him, why do you collect coins? And he says, Ota amar mudra dosh, you know, which is quite apparent. Mudra meaning the coin and also the kind of habit. So I think Ray's dialogue is very important. And as Madhu rightly pointed out, it is culture specific, milieu specific, character specific. and the sound reflects that. And even in the Charulata sequence, which was just shown, the sound of the monkeys, monkey dance, that sound recurs when she takes the lorgnette, that binocular, and looks at her husband. When she's looking at her husband, in the background, the monkey sound is coming. So, it's very, very strange, the way Ray, uses his apparel, his apparatus, and sometimes it's invisible completely. I often say that sometimes Ray is so great that he doesn't seem great. Art lies in concealing art. I think that is one of Ray's great plus points.
Thank you very much, Ashok, and thank you very much, Madhu. In today's session, we had some very eminent people who are listening in, and we've gone in like 3 hours now already. But I am wondering if Sriram Raghavan is still around. Sriram Raghavan is, of course, everybody knows Sriram Raghavan. I'm only saying that Madhu does a lot of sound design for Sriram Raghavan. So after Madhu's presentation, I'm wondering if Sriram Raghavan is still around. And if he's not around, if he comes back, then do please come in, because we'd like to hear your views. But before that, it's on to 7 o'clock now, so we are really, really out of time. But let's, because there are a lot of, I can see a lot of FTI students here as well. We are 131 people at the end of 3 hours. So, so we can congratulate ourselves. I think, we have lasted longer than IPL while talking sensibly on Ray. So I think it's a big, big thing. But if any of the FTI students have any questions, then I think you can maybe just raise your hand and I can identify. Yeah, Amit, you were saying something.
Ratnottama ji had raised her hand to say something.
Ratnottama ji, now that you're saying, I was saying we've discussed so much of Ray and missed out on so many aspects. For example, dances in Ray's films, and if Ratnottama ji is here, she did an amazing session on dancing, which I missed completely. But at some point of time, I'd like to see the recording. And then Ray's sense of humor. I think Ashok was talking about his dialogues, but Ray's sense of humor is incredible. It's a very cultured and it's a very nuanced sense of humor, and it's amazing. But I just don't want to stand in between the FTI students asking any questions now, because let's just hear them out if they have any question. Anybody who's raising his or her hand. Okay, so if there is no questions from FTI side, then maybe Ratnottama ji can. Very, very happy to see you, ma'am. Yeah, and your mic, if you can just on your mic. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, very, very small observations, but taking off from the scenes that have been played. Of course, the most obvious, Shatranj ke Khiladi, someone mentioned about the horses and the elephants. Those are, of course, taking off from the chessboard. On the chessboard, the horses and elephants have led to the two friends falling out. And here the horses and elephants are taking the Nawab, deposed Nawab, who doesn't abdicate. He is deposed and he's being taken away. But in the lawyer's scene, we talked about the tabla as contributing to the humor, under the layer of humor in the scene. But it's also the two characters, Mir and Mirza, they are like the tabla, the baya and the daya, the two tablas. You can't play one without the other. So these two are like the tablas. And particularly in a game of chess, you can't have one without the other. You can't have a game of chess without a player, another player. So that is also one of the layers in these scenes. And like it has been pointed out that, they have become one in that scene. By the time the scene ends and Abajani is dead, these two exit the scene in unison. I mean, they're running together. And in the Abar Aronne, the Mela ground, Mela is heart, where you have the buying and selling. And in the initial, the very first sequence, you see the four characters. and the ladies, the two ladies, and three ladies rather. And you see, it is established the give and take of money, the currency changing hands. Sharmila is about to offer money. Soumitra says no. But when Sharmila is going away, her Bodhi says my money, and she gives the money to Bodhi. Then Shomit Bhanjo gives money, says, why did you take money from so and so? I will give you money for nothing. But when she reaches out for the money, he obviously is not giving for nothing. He wants her in return of money. So that give and take of money and the currency note. Robi Ghosh comes and says, give me 10 rupees. He says he's going to squander it on Jua. He says, doesn't matter, I know that, but let us give it to him. So money on this heart, it's a very potent imagery, a potent metaphor there.
Indeed, thank you very much for that intervention. Very, very valid, very deep points.
Thank you for letting me just share my enjoyment. Thank you.
Any other observations or questions or queries from FTI students? Okay, if not, I think there will be more occasions like this where you can, where we will also probably try and make this a little shorter. But I think I'm very proud that we spoke 3 hours sensibly on Ray. And we missed out. What all we missed out, it's scary. We missed out on his art direction altogether. Having, so closely, discussed it and detailed it and gone into it, etc., etc. So a lot of it was missed. Hopefully we'll have more sessions like Kedar mentioned on music. I will say thank you very much to the 92 who lasted 3 hours, and also to the 220 who joined in the very beginning. And this has gone on for very long. I know it is tough and difficult, but it's great credit to Ray that we can all sit here today and celebrate him 100 years after he was born. I also want to thank very much my team who are behind the scenes, Prasad Thorat, Yogesh Sunavne, and Adelphia Walsh, who you do not see, but who worked very, very hard to make this possible. And thank you very much, all of you, for your time. And we will meet again very soon. Thank you.